Well, we can speak to Scott Lucas, a professor of international politics at Birmingham University here in the United Kingdom. Scott, great to have you on the programme. You heard how Sarah ended her report there, that while other countries, not just the United States, have criticised the WHO and its apparent cosy relationship with China, that most countries have said, look, now is not the time to get into that. So why is Donald Trump the outlier here?
Domestic politics, because Donald Trump wants to get reelected. Simple as that. Let's take two very different narratives here. The first is that of the international community, that while many agree that China was slow to recognize the severity of the outbreak in early January, that it was slow to release information to its own people and to the international community, by late January, that information was being provided. And of course, we know that China has been one of the first countries successful in containing the virus, and that information has been transmitted. We know that the World Health Organization did not criticize China in the early days of the crisis, trying to hope it could work with the Chinese, which it wound up doing. And indeed, we know that at the end of January, a prominent politician praised China for its transparency and thanked President Xi Jinping. Who is that politician? Donald Trump. Because the other narrative now, not Donald Trump in January, but Donald Trump in May, is someone who is facing 91,000 deaths in the United States, more than 1.5 million confirmed cases. And the fact that his administration did very little between January and March to deal with the outbreak because Trump denied it was occurring. So when you've been caught mismanaging a crisis, what do? You blame someone else. World Health Organization, China, Democrats, media, little green men from outer space, for all we know.
Absolutely. And some models say that possibly by the end of next month, it could be almost 150,000 deaths in the United States. Do you think that he's actually told the WHO about the changes he's demanding? Because the letter itself just talks about substantive changes and it doesn't go into any detail.
Well, there's one political change that's desired, and it intersects politics and medicine, and that is the admission of China to the World Health Organization. Taiwan has been very, very effective in containing coronavirus, less than 10 deaths there, I believe. And people say quite rightly, we can learn from what they've done. Now, whether you need to learn from what they've done by raising the one China, two China issue by admitting them to the WHO, that in a sense is beyond the individual doctor's pay grade. But beyond that political question of Taiwan's admission, no. I mean, the Trump administration was notified at the end of December and in early January that there was an outbreak in Wuhan. They were given full information by the end of January. There is no evidence that information was withheld after that point. And the main claim that Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo make, which is, oh, this virus must have been manufactured in a Chinese lab or allowed to escape, the intelligence services, including American intelligence services, say that's not the case.
I've asked you this question plenty of times, but is this just another example of the new world order from the one that we knew, which was always in some way led by the United States? Where are we and where are we going? Is this another example of how Trump sees the world and puts America first and therefore the rest of the world comes last?
I think we need to get beyond Donald Trump. You know, the idea that the United States led and almost 200 countries follow, if it was true during the Cold War, immediately afterwards, the Iraq War of 2003 really put paid to that notion. So even before this current crisis, we weren't talking about a one superpower. And we're not talking about two superpowers, the US and China. There are many countries, many regions who have their political interest, their economic interest. And now, of course, coronavirus shows that they all have a common interest in health security. The quicker we move away from the question that we immediately look to Washington and Donald Trump on any issue, whether to say yay or boo, the quicker I think we get to taking responsibility for ourselves.
And yet there is this idea, as you've said, in terms of the coronavirus, that if one of us is unsafe, then we're all unsafe. And yet we've had at least one example, if not two, of the Trump administration trying to secure some kind of exclusive access to any potential vaccine that may be in development. He is putting America first here, while he sometimes says, OK, we're going to work collectively. The evidence seems to suggest that those words are not necessarily the ones that we should believe in terms of the collective action that he is espousing sometimes. So where are we in terms of how the Americans interact with the rest of the world when it comes to finding a cure for this virus?
Well, first of all, we can interact with each other. We can cooperate economically in terms of medical advice if we're outside the United States. And we've seen that. But to deal with your question directly, Donald Trump's not the only person in Washington. There are adults in the room there. There's Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top infectious diseases expert, Dr. Deborah Birx, the coronavirus coordinator. There are agencies like the Centers for Disease Control. You have to maintain links with those agencies and those adults. And at the same time, the one person who is not the adult in the room, Donald Trump, you almost have to, if he's not going to self-isolate himself, isolate him. Don't talk as much about crazy statements like hydrochloroquine, which he put out to divert attention. Talk about what the medical advice is from the United States, what the need is for protective equipment, for testing and tracing, and encourage that effort. And hopefully the adults in the room will be able to listen, even if Donald Trump doesn't.
Scott, thank you. As always, really appreciate your contribution. Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at Birmingham University.